Hello, children. How are you? Can you say me which image is this? Yes, it is a spaceship, which is a vehicle used to travel in space. Is this a picture of a human being? No. What makes you think so? If you clearly notice the picture, the eyes, nose, ears are different and weird, isn't it, children? Yes, these type of creatures are called as aliens. Alien, a foreigner, especially one who is not a naturalized citizen of the country where he or she is living. Today, we will have an interesting play called Collectors. In brief, this is a play which indicates an adventurous story of students and teachers who had been for a walk. Before we begin with the play, first of all, we'll know the characters. Students are Pete, Carol, Tracy, Glenn, Wayne, Don. Teachers Mr. Hunt, Miss Swan, Mrs. Jones. Occupants of the house were Mrs. Brown and Mr. Brown. Shall we begin with the interesting play, children? Yes. First scene, lonely countryside. The children are out for an adventure walk with the teachers. It's raining hard. Miss Swan, isn't there somewhere we can shelter? Mr. Hunt, not until we get to the village. Mrs. Jones, how far is that? Mr. Hunt, nearly 3 miles. Don, 3 miles? Tracy, I am soaked. Miss Swan, the children are getting very wet. Mr. Hunt, I can't help that. We'll just have to press on. Pete, can't we shelter over there, sir? Mr. Hunt, where? Pete, there, in that house. Mr. Hunt, that's not a house, surely. Hard to see in all the rain. Miss Swan, of course it is. Try wiping your glasses. Mr. Hunt, you are right. Lonely place to choose for a house. It certainly wasn't there when I was here walking last summer. As I had said, teachers and students were out for an adventure walk, and it was raining heavily. So Miss Swan asked Mr. Hunt, who had been to that place earlier, for any shelter. For which Mr. Hunt says that until they reached the village, there were no chances of shelter, which was 3 miles away. Children who were listening to the conversation of the teachers were surprised to see the house in the lonely place. Pete eagerly shows the house to Mr. Hunt. Mr. Hunt exclaims that there wasn't a house when he had been last summer. Now, moving on to the next part of the lesson. Mrs. Jones. Funny looking place. Miss Swan. Are we just going to stand here in the downpour gaping at it? Don. Yes. Can't we go up there and ask for shelter, sir? Mr. Hunt. We can't take you all crowd into a private house. You are dripping wet. Mrs. Jones. There is probably a shed or garage. We could shelter there. Miss Swan. We can at least ask. Wayne. Yes, sir. Why not? Tracy. I am freezing. Mr. Hunt. Oh, all right. Mrs. Jones, with a surprising look, says that it is a funny looking place. Miss Swan also inquires Mr. Hunt whether they are to stand and gaze at rain and at the lonely house. Don inquires with Mr. Hunt whether they could ask shelter in the house. Mr. Hunt denies, saying that it was not decent to take all crowd who were dripping into a private house. Mrs. Jones suggests that they could take shelter in a shed or a garage. Even the children started insisting Mr. Hunt to inquire, for which he agrees at the last. In this part of the lesson, we have come across the word gape, which means look with amazement. Scene 2. Inside the kitchen of the house. Mrs. Brown is standing with all the children and teachers. Mr. Brown comes in through the outer door. Mr. Brown, I've hung up all the wet clothing in the porch. Mr. Hunt, I don't know why I'm still holding this walking stick. Mr. Brown, give it to me. I'll put it outside with the other things. Mr. Hunt, it's all right. I'll hang it on the back of this chair. Mrs. Brown, now that we have all introduced ourselves, why don't you children sit down? Mr. Brown, and all the grown ups can come through into the sitting room. Mrs. Brown, you children will be all right here, won't you? There isn't room enough there for everyone. Carol, yes, thanks. Glenn, oh, yes. Pete, we'll be fine. Mrs. Jones, thank you very much for taking us in like this. Mr. Brown, our pleasure. Mrs. Brown, there's a fresh pot of tea made in the other room. Would you like a cup? Miss Swan, I'd love one. Mrs. Jones, so would I. Mrs. Brown, would you like to come through then? Teachers and students went near the house and got permitted to get into the house. In the next scene, everyone were inside the kitchen of the house. Mr. Brown gets inside the house, saying that their wet clothes were hung in the porch and they could relax. Everyone introduced themselves. Mrs. Brown gave a suggestion that all grown ups would occupy the sitting room and children in the kitchen, as there were no sufficient rooms. Children and teachers were happy as they had got a safe place for shelter in this heavy rain. Mrs. Brown offered a cup of tea for teachers in this cold climate. New word which we come across in this part is porch, covered entrance. Third scene. Mr. and Mrs. Brown and the three teachers go out. The children are silent for a moment or two, looking round. Wayne, you can't hear any sound of that wind in here? Tracy, no, it's terribly quiet. Weird. Don, I can just hear their voices in the sitting room. Glenn, it's cold in here too. Wayne, maybe we feel cold because we were tired from all that walking. Tracy, and we did get wet. Glenn, no, not just that. It is cold. Pete, and empty. This kitchen reminds me of a hospital. Where do they wash up? Don, in the sink. Or the washing up machine? Pete, there is nothing like that. Carol, there is nothing standing about either. No plates, no pots and pans. Things like that. Don, they'll put away in cupboards. Mr. and Mrs. Brown and teachers moved towards sitting room. Children felt everything weird as entire kitchen was empty without any plates, pots and pans. So Don suggests that they might have put everything in the cupboard. New word which we come across in this is weird, which means strange or unusual. Wayne opens a cupboard near the back door. Wayne, this one is quite empty. Don, don't go poking about, Wayne. Pete opens the fridge door. Pete, there is nothing at all in this fridge. And the light's not on. It's not even working. Tracy, Leave things alone, you two. It's cheeky to snoop. Besides, they might come in and catch you. Carol, I thought there was something a bit strange about Mr. and Mrs. Brown. Pete, funny? You should say that. So did I. Glenn, perhaps they are crooks. This is their hideout. Tracy, they'd hardly let us in if they were crooks, would they? Don, no, that's silly. When Wayne heard Carol saying that there are no plates, no pots and pans, he was very curious and opened a cupboard wherein he could find nothing in it. Curious and opens the fridge but finds nothing, and even it's not been working. So each and every child were having a doubt of their own with regards to Mr. and Mrs. Brown. New words which we come across are cheeky, which means disrespectful, snoop, which means poke around, assignment of the day. Collect the picture of an alien and spaceship. Second, who were the occupants of the house? Third, why were the children finding weird in the house? We'll continue the next part of the lesson in the next class, children. Thank you. Have a nice day.